Everyone, my name is Andrzej Kubisiak. I'm the Deputy Director of Polish Economic Institute. I'm glad that we have an opportunity to meet and discuss today about the future of the energy transition in Europe. The date is special because of the timing. At the same time, in Glasgow, world leaders discuss about the future of the energy and climate at the COP26. At the same time, today, we would like to present our last report prepared by Energy and Climate team in Polish Economic Institute. It's a foresight study which was prepared in the second quarter of 2021 with participation of 27 Polish experts which are connected with the energy and climate topic. We have gathered their views on several key areas which were related to the energy transition in Europe. Before I giving the floor to the authors of the report, I will share with you with one of the hint. Polish experts believe that first 10 countries will achieve climate neutrality by 2045, so before 2050. But at the same time, 55% reduction in the carbon emission, which is one of the main goals of Fit for 55 strategy, will occur, but not sooner than 2032, so 2 years later than it's predicted by European Commission. I won't tell anymore, and I will let Adam Juszczak, one of the report's author, give you more details in some short presentation. And after the presentation, we will start discussion with our great guests, Ms. Dora Fazekas, Managing Director of Cambridge Econometrics, and Andrzej Ancygier, Senior Energy and Climate Policy Analyst from Climate Analytics. Adam, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will just put on the presentation. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Adam Juszczak, and I am the analyst in climate and energy team in Polish Economic Institute, and I will give you a short view what are the key messages of our report. We decided to ask ourselves two important questions. Will the EU achieve targets of CO2 emission reduction? And in connection to that, how much the structure of energy production and consumption will change in the future? These are two very important questions regarding the whole future of Europe, the climate change, and of course, the Fit for 55 policy that were introduced in July this year. Our report was conducted in the Delphi method with 27 experts in fields of science, business, non-governmental organizations, and public administration. We asked our experts 5 Delphi theses, and we asked them about their thesis importance, the time of the predicted implementation in their opinion, and influence of both factor and barriers on the thesis. Will it delay it, or will it be completely unable to fulfill the thesis? And a Delphi study has 2 rounds. First, when the experts give their opinion on the subject, and the second when they are confronted with the overall results, and then they can review their opinion. So what is the most important for the energy transition in the EU according to the experts? The answer is quite simple. Same as the European Commission, the experts think that the most important is to achieve CO2 emission reduction by 55% compared to 1990 level. As mentioned before by Andrzej, they think that it will happen a little bit later than 2030, but not too much. And apart from that, the experts think that also increasing the share of renewable energy in the energy consumption in the EU by to 40%, which is also very important, as well as achieving the climate neutrality by at least 10 countries. Also, according to the experts, very important is the thesis that fossil fuel will no longer be burned in the EU cities. What is interesting, the fifth thesis we asked the experts, so lowering the share of nuclear energy in electricity production in the EU was deemed not very important. Most of the experts decided that this has medium importance for energy transition, and the opinion about will it happen or should it happen were varying with the experts. We also asked the experts when the thesis could happen. So basically, as mentioned before, first, we will reduce CO2 emissions by 55%. According to the median opinion of the experts, it will happen no sooner than 2032. Then in 2035, we will achieve we will exceed 40% of renewable energy in gross final energy consumption. No sooner than 2041, we will stop burning fossil fuels in the cities inside the EU. If it will happen, according to the experts, we will lower the share of nuclear energy in electricity production below 20%, but no sooner than 2044. And in 2035, at least 10 countries will achieve climate neutrality from 27 that are inside the EU. We also asked the experts what factors and barriers are most important for the implementation of the thesis. And the results were quite obvious that the experts think that spendings, both public spending of the EU countries and the EU funds for energy transition are the most important factor for the implementation of our thesis to achieve climate neutrality, emission reduction, or changing the structure of the energy consumption and production. Also, they think that very important is environmental awareness, which is quite obvious that bigger environmental awareness in the society helps to elect governments that are more pro green changes. What are the biggest barriers that could prevent this from happening or delay their implementation? Well, first of all, same as with the factors, the public spendings are the most important, and on average, it was deemed very important by 81.6 experts. Also, that what could prevent the change from happening quickly, high cost of innovative technologies, which would delay the introduction of new technologies to the economy, as well as low level of support for environment funding in the European New Green Deal. To sum up, what is the future of EU climate goals? Well, first of all, climate neutrality will be achieved at least 5 years before 2050 by 10 or more EU countries, which is 6 more countries than announced the climate neutrality before 2050 up to this moment, because right now we have only 4 declarations: Finland by 2035, Austria by 2040, and Germany and Sweden up to 2045. What is also very interesting, according to the experts' opinion, reducing the emission of CO2 by 54% will be possible no sooner than 2032, and which is also very important according to experts' opinion in this short term, because we have only only a decade left. It will happen mostly in the in the electric production sector, which according to them is easiest right now to conduct the change and reducing the carbon emission. EU gross panel consumption will exceed 30% up to 2035, and overall, according to the experts, even though probably it will happen due to increasing the renewable energy sources will be much cheaper in the future than right now, and they will will help with phasing out the fossil fuel based electricity production. Up to 2041, fossil fuels will no longer be burned in the EU cities. And what is very important, only 26% of the experts deem decreasing nuclear energy share in the energy mix of highly importance. And what is interesting, the experts point out that, of course, the countries that invest a lot in renewable energy right now and have very green energy mix will probably be phasing out their nuclear energy production. However, in the same time, we'll have the counter factor in the countries such as Poland or Czech or Romania that still has a lot of coal and gas in the energy, in the electricity production, and they need a stable energy source, which will be, among others, the nuclear energy. So these two factors will be will happen in the same time. So probably the share of nuclear energy in the energy production will remain more or less the same. Thank you for your attention, and now I'm giving a voice to Magdalena Maj, the head of the climate and energy team. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for very nice and interesting presentation of our report. And now, as it was said previously, we will start a debate with two of our panelists. Just to remind for us, it's Dr. Dora Fazekas from Cambridge Econometrics and Dr. Andrzej Ancygier from Climate Analytics. During this debate, I would like to pick some points that were highlighted by Adam during the presentation and that were investigated in our study. And I am, of course, interested in our guest's opinion on the report itself and on the report results. But I would like also to discuss some current issues that are happening in the energy sector. So Adam and previously Andrzej were talking about the time of CO2 emission reduction by 55%. The goal of EU is 2030, and according to our study, may happen 2 years later, according to the median response. For this to happen, there has to be a lot of investment made. So according to the plan, it should be around 5 trillion of euros. And we think that it's the biggest challenge for the EU after pandemic. So my question is, and I will direct it first maybe to Dora, how would you comment our results of the study, And do you think that during this time of 2030 year, it's possible to achieve the reduction of 55% in Europe? And how do you think the latest shocks in energy prices could change the possibility of achieving this goal?
Thanks, Magda, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, so basically, Cambridge Econometrics has a global macroeconometric model, which is called E3ME, and it has been used to contribute to a number of European Commission impact assessments, more broadly to support policy evaluation and decision-making within the Commission. And both the modeling we have done and what the European Commission modeling has done shows that these reduction targets are achievable by 2030, but it does need a lot of investment. So as long as the Commission and the Member States are committed to well-designed and effective policy to deliver these targets, then it is achievable by 2030. And our results have shown that achieving these results and getting on the decarbonisation pathway would have positive impact, basically on both on the macroeconomic level, so both for GDP, but also on employment effects. This has to do with investment in the power sector on one hand, and also energy efficiency and reduction in fossil fuel imports that lead to these positive economic effects. And also the consumers would benefit from energy savings, lower fuel bills and VAT reductions, and higher economic activities from investment. And of course, you were asking about the shocks, the recent shocks, and I guess you referred to the energy prices that are higher recently. So yeah, that's something that we need to take into account, and also it has some distributional effects that need to be either compensated, but that's something that we are also looking at, and also how the energy mix can change and should change with the energy transformation, and that would also have an effect on those prices.
Thank you, Dora. I would like to continue the topic of this recent shock in energy prices, and my question will be to Dr. Andrzej Jancygiel about what do you think? How do you think the narrative about the debate about achieving climate neutrality and energy transformation may be influenced by this latest shocks? Because on the at least Polish debate, I hear opinions from two sides. From one side, for example, that if you would rely more on renewable energy sources, then we wouldn't depend so much on, for example, high gas prices and now even high coal prices. But on the other hand, there are opinions that high EU ETS prices influence high electricity prices, and that renewable sources are unpredictable and are unstable. So we should have some source of energy working in the base of the energy system. What is your general opinion about that?
Well, first of all, thank you for the very interesting study, which allows us to understand what kind of the expert feeling is about the direction in which we are going, in which the EU is going. I have to be very blunt about these two narratives. I just don't get the second one. How can you, how can some policymakers, because that's coming from the kind of the policymaking perspective, which is, for example, the government wants to renegotiate the Green Deal and Fit for 55, or the Green Deal, I mean, Fit for 55 is being negotiated anyway. But you know, each kilowatt hour of electricity from wind, from solar, each heat pump that replaces gas heating, each renovated house decreases our dependency on fossil fuels. I mean, that's the only way forward. I don't even want to think where we would have been without the pressure from the European Union to develop renewables, to invest in energy efficiency, to move away from coal and gas. And the coal is coming now increasingly from Russia, for example, because Polish coal is much more expensive than imported coal. So in this case, I just don't understand how you can, slow down development or European pathway away from fossil fuels. It's actually, and that's why I would say Poland, the EU will not only meet the 55% goal, it will exceed this. We just have to keep in mind the EU goal is not 55, it's at least 55. So there is a way to increase this goal, just as the EU did with this previous 40% goal. By more ambitious renewable energy and energy efficiency goals, the EU scaled up this goal to between 46 and 48%. So there is a pathway there. I would say this goal will be overachieved also for other reasons. So the first one is exactly the the energy crisis that we witness currently. Even if the government fails to understand, that each kilowatt hour would take us move away from imported fossil fuels, each kilowatt hour from renewable energy sources. Only if the government fails to understand this, polls, at least those I speak to, do get this point, and they do increasingly rely on PV panels, on heat pumps, on renewable energy sources, on energy efficiency measures to next time such a crisis comes and next time our Russian neighbors decides to take us hostage. Because, even if we don't import gas from Russia directly, we will be affected by energy prices anyway on the market, which is, decided by demand and supply, right? So if we don't get the money from Russia, if we don't get the gas from Russia, someone else will. So that doesn't change it. There are two other reasons why I would say we will exceed the 55% goal, or we will just meet this before 2030. The other one is we're moving away from decarbonization of the power sector, so we can accelerate here. We have a huge potential with renewables being the cheapest source of energy, but we also see that quite a lot is happening in the area of mobility. Slowly but steadily, the electric vehicles are accelerating deployment in Western European countries. Hopefully this will also happen in Poland. Development of public transport, development of railways, for example, is also moving forward in Poland as well. So there is something happening here. And also in the building sector, this is also an area in which, if you just get a few PV panels on the roof and a heat pump, you can be almost climate neutral. So that's also a way to free ourselves from imported fossil fuels, while at the same time create new jobs, as Dora mentioned, and also facilitate economic growth. I mean, just on the number, you mentioned the number, the 5 trillion. The point here is that, we have to invest this way or the other. We can either invest it in increasing or continuing our dependency on fossil fuels, or we can increase this in our economy into creating renewables, new jobs in places where they have been no jobs, because the beauty of renewables and energy efficiency is exactly that you create jobs in rural areas, in areas where, for example, coal phase out can be mitigated.
Thank you for this answer. I personally think that there is no other way than transition. I think we are already on the path, and in reality, no one is thinking that we may come back, because I don't know where we can come back to. But there is debate maybe about the pace and about some specific directions. But for this, I wanted to ask you, according to our study, experts highlighted that low public spending by EU member states and the high costs of implementing of innovative technologies are the main barriers for the successful realization of the thesis of CO2 reduction and generally transition and carbon neutrality. Dora, would you agree with this statement? So low public investments by EU countries and high cost of innovative technologies, or maybe do you see more crucial than this ones?
Yeah, before I answer this question, I just wanted to reflect on what Andrei was saying. And I know we wanted to have a debate, but I have to say I agree with every point he raised. So coming back to your question about the spending and what is the obstacle. So basically, yeah, public spending and also private investment is needed to deliver this transformation. And these two are linked to each other. So we can't really say one is lacking or the other is the obstacle. Public procurement and investment can help to bring down the cost of new technologies. So addressing the first issue would definitely help with the second issue of getting the technology cost down and also private investment needed. So the public sector clearly has a role in helping households to take these technologies up, including through fiscal measures. And it's important to highlight also that spending now is more beneficial than delaying action or no action, as costs will just be even higher. And even if the targets can be achieved with a delayed action, the associated costs would be higher than if we start acting now. And in my opinion, another obstacle can be the employment impact. So basically looking at what would be the net employment effects of such transformation. And as Andrei was saying, there are jobs that are going to be lost in the energy and mining sector, for example. But our numbers show that from the additional investment and there are additional jobs created in the electricity sectors and the associated supply chains, for example. So the net effect is positive of this transformation.
Okay, I was saying about the possibility of having different structure of energy mix, and now while this energy shocks happened, to the debate came back the possibility of having nuclear energy in taxonomy. And I would like to ask Dr. Andrzej about his opinion on nuclear energy. Our expert stated that in 2044, the share of nuclear energy in electricity production in the EU will fall below 20%. But 1/3 of them stated that will never be lower than 20%. So the opinions are divided. And I wanted to ask you about this opinion, and maybe also we can include your thoughts about SMR, small modular reactors technology. Do you think that nuclear energy should be included in taxonomy, and do you think that nuclear energy could help us to achieve neutrality or not?
Maybe I'll just quickly go back to the point about the money, because I don't even, I mean, if there's enough money on the table or not, that's one discussion, and whether, I just don't think it's the biggest issue. The biggest issue, it's an important issue to have the money, but very important element is how do you spend the money? And from private experience, I know that, now to get the funding for example, renovation or heat pump and so on, you first of all have to spend the money, and then once upon a day, a few months later, or even later, you will get part of this money refunded. I mean, it's great that you have the subsidy for the money, for the renovation, for the installation of heat pump, for the installation of PV panels, and so on and so forth. But many people are not brave enough to spend money that they don't have on the investment. So I'm just not quite sure why we cannot just make it simpler and already include the subsidy in the price of this product, so that you don't pay, 50,000-60,000 zloty first of all and get the refund one day. You just pay much more from the very beginning. So that's one point about the money. So how we spend the money is as important as how much money we have on the table. In terms of the 5 trillion, as Dora mentioned, actually, if you give a Pole 5,000 zloty for the PV panel on the roof, this household will invest 4 or 5 times as much into climate action. So there's also another great way to trigger much more action on the ground. So and just one last point about about in terms of that was, I think I was missing the major obstacle, because even environmental consciousness will not bring us there if there are no solutions, if people don't know what they can do. And now, for example, again, going back to my favorite example of heat pump, if many people don't even know how it works, don't even know what it is. So even if they worry about climate change, but don't know what the solution is, and the government is telling them natural gas is the solution, then this is, I would say, the major issue. It's not, and maybe pointing out to the real solution would be a nice starting point for this case. Going back to nuclear, I mean, investing in technology, so maybe this way, just connect this with the energy crisis that we are witnessing currently. What I would expect is the government to react to this by, first of all, developing what we already have on the table. We can have a few hundred additional megawatts or even gigawatts of solar energy within a matter of months. This is something that we already witnessed. This is something that happened with the very successful Mój Prąd, or My Electricity program, which was very successful. That was actually one of the major success stories in terms of energy and climate policy in Poland. And I provide this as an example how this can work. It's not a perfect one. Again, the subsidy could have been included in the price, but some companies did it already anyway. You could kind of increase and scale it up to make us much more independent from natural gas, from fossil fuels in the coming months. On-land wind energy or onshore wind energy would take us maybe a year, but this can also make us much freer from imported fossil fuels in 2023. Offshore, 2025, 2026. Nuclear, one day, 2030s, maybe. So, I mean, not quite sure why we would invest in technology, which is, first of all, much more expensive than what we have now. Secondly, that may not be there when you need it. And thirdly, where the trend in terms of the price is going in exactly the opposite direction from the renewables, for example. But now the point is, you have to have the baseload, right? That's the narrative. You have to have the baseload. You have to replace coal with nuclear 1-to-1. And also this results from the lacking understanding of the future power sector, which will be much more flexible, much more intelligent. So the fact that the wind is not always blowing, the sun is not always shining, we know that, we knew that for quite a while already. And in this case, you just need to facilitate other options. For example, storage is the obvious one, but then demand management, developing grid, integrating out of the sector so that you can use your car in the future as the battery, for example. And in this case, you can just free the energy of the citizens, and they will come up with so many numerous ideas. Also, some renewables are also dispatchable, so you can shape them. For example, biogas. In Germany, we make a huge mistake in which you just put biogas in the grid constantly instead of saving it and using it up when there is no sun, when there is no wind. So there are numerous options, and in this case, small modular reactors, I mean, I wouldn't really rely on technology that doesn't exist currently and may not exist anytime soon to solve a problem where we need the solution tomorrow and the day after, or even today.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to relate to your comment about heat pumps and the My Electricity program, which is indeed very successful in Poland because we have currently more than 5 gigawatts households that are standalone. In Poland, it's like 1/5 of all of the households. And there are dwellers of multiple household buildings that do not have the possibility to invest in their own PV installation. And therefore, in the future, they will not be able to, in this way, reduce their electricity. But I'm thinking that we could create a model where mostly consumers that are affected by energy poverty could, with the support of the government, buy some kind of shares in PV installations. And thanks to energy from these installations, they could decrease their bills. And I know that this solution is implemented in US. So in this way, we could also include the more consumers in this active way of having energy transition. And my comment on the heat pumps, we also have a program for installation of, for changing the installation of heating source, and also for renovation of buildings, which is clean air program. And in this program, the most popular heat source is natural gas boiler, and it's not heat pumps. And we in other department in Polish Economic Institute made a study on this, on the opinion of the consumer in this program, and they stated that heat pumps are too expensive. The installation is too expensive for now, but also there may be other reasons, like you said, that they don't understand the way heat pumps work. But also now I'm thinking that when the gas prices went higher, so that installation gas boiler may not be so attractive, and this may show that indeed we should rather invest in less fossil fuel dependent sources. So I would like to ask Dora if you have any comment to our discussion. I think we are focusing now more on consumer sides. Maybe you have some thoughts how to protect them against the energy prices that I think that will be rising now due to these energy shocks, but generally investment will inflict higher energy prices, whether we have energy transition or not. Especially, for example, in Poland, we will need to invest in some other energy sources.
Yeah, certainly. So energy poverty is something that definitely needs to be addressed. And well, as you may know, in Hungary, there is a limit to the utility prices that households pay. I'm not saying that's the solution, because then it doesn't motivate at all to invest in new technologies. But the government definitely has a role in compensating the most vulnerable, or those households that don't really have the means to pay for the increased prices. So either payments or subsidies or measures to alleviate the burden on these households is something that we should be considering, and also on helping them to make use of the new technologies. And as Andrei was saying, if there is a grant, for example, to use solar PVs, then that household would definitely match it with their own funding.
If I may add to this, exactly, that's the issue with all renewable sources and energy efficiency is the upfront funding, right? So upfront investment. So, well, natural gas is cheap, or the installation is cheap initially, right? This installation itself, but just continue buying imported natural gas, and you can see that the price can explode. So it's not only that it's more expensive long term, but it's also very insecure, and we can witness this. We witness this currently, and this is now also very strange to me to understand why Polish government is pushing for using public money to make our more dependent on imported natural gas. This is just difficult to understand because we're not investing the money in extraction of natural gas. We just don't have natural gas in Poland. So we just develop infrastructure to connect poles to send more money to, well, whoever sells the gas. So that's one point. So maybe what if the program was like, instead of paying for the electricity bill or the buying coal or gas on an annual basis, you just pay back the debt or the credit with very low preferential rates, and then some of this will be co-funded by the resources from the European, or from the sale of EU ETS emissions. And this is exactly where we just go to what you mentioned, the price of emissions allowances, which by the government is blamed, or by some or other policymakers and stakeholders is blamed for the high electricity prices. The point here is the money stays in Poland, and it's up to Polish government to decide what it can do with it. So exactly this high upfront investment cost can be taken care of by exactly the income from selling emissions allowances to those who pollute. So that's also something that can be taken care of. But it's just instead of talking about solutions or the government talking about solutions, it is just kind of having the same narrative. It's gas. It's I mean, also the idea that it's just a solution that will be there for a few months or a few years. It's not going to happen. Just wondering why we're moving from one addiction to coal to another addiction on imported natural gas instead of moving straight to the sources of energy, which will be cheaper and cheaper because the benefits, economies of scale and so on will decrease the prices of heat pumps quite dramatically in the coming years.
Yeah, and to add on what you were saying about the ETS allowances, it's basically there is a proposal on the table that there would be a parallel ETS covering the road transport and the buildings heating sectors, and there would be considerable revenues raised from selling those allowances, which can then be used to be recycled back and used for new technologies, investing in energy efficiency, investing and also compensating the households.
And Dora, you mentioned the new ETS parallel system in residential buildings and transport sector. So I guess those households that installed recently gas boilers, they will have to pay for CO2 emissions from natural gas. So this installation may be less competitive to other sources that were available. But with natural gas, at least in Poland, having now energy mix based on coal, there is the government idea to now have transition fuel, which is natural gas, and as you, Andrzej, stated, those are the investment for several years only. The idea is to diversify the supply of natural gas, which is actually the good thing if we will rely on natural gas. So for now we have like 55% of natural gas imported from Russia, but during this year there were issues with LNG actually that were exported mostly to Asia because there were higher prices offered there. So I think that this debate will not be cleared yet whether we should rely on natural gas as a transitional fuel. But there are plans of Baltic pipes that should be finished by the end of the next year, of another terminal. But generally in Europe we have also Nord Stream 2 that will also supply more of natural gas. But talking about gas generally, we have some good initiative, which is hydrogen strategy that was finally announced, like I think 2 days ago, where there is a plan of installing 2 gigawatts of power in electrolyzers, and there is a plan to produce hydrogen with offshore that will be installed soon in the Baltic area. But so maybe you have some comment on hydrogen, future hydrogen economy, because there is also debate whether, for example, hydrogen should occupy some space in transport sector, for example. There are experts who say that only batteries should be allowed in all of the transport modes. even heavy trucks. So I'm curious if you have any opinion on this. Maybe Andrzej?
Yes, if I may. I mean, just in terms of hydrogen, I'm just wondering if I just hope, because hydrogen is not a solution to our problems tomorrow or the day after, but very well in the late 2020s, maybe 2030s, or definitely 2030s, but maybe already earlier. We were surprised by the decreasing cost of renewables, and I just hope that this may move away with the kind of the passion towards nuclear for some strange reason. I mean, I just don't understand the passion for nuclear. And hydrogen is a solution for different areas. For example, we realized recently that in green steel area we go much further than we expected to be, but we are lagging behind in such a simple area like and renovation of buildings, which is a common sense solution. So we may be surprised by how fast it will develop. But in any case, in terms of where hydrogen will be deployed, obviously passenger cars, this is the area in which batteries won for quite a while. But when we're talking about heavy duty, when we're talking about steel sector, when we're talking about chemicals, areas in which we already use plenty of hydrogen, the brown, the dirty hydrogen, these are the areas where the hydrogen has a space has a role to play. So I just hope that this may kind of take some money away from this project of building nuclear, which the money that will be wasted actually in this case, because also I'm quite pessimistic about a multi-billion project that didn't really work out very well in other countries, and I also don't really trust government with such a huge project. I would much better. I mean, the beauty of hydrogen, just last point on this one, is that you can develop it steadily, and you see the results immediately, or in a few months at least, because it's scalable. And with nuclear, it's there or it's not there. It's black and white. And this is I'm just afraid that with nuclear, with the very probable postponements, it will just not be built.
Yeah, if I may add something to this. So yeah, you mentioned steel production that is currently using so-called gray hydrogen, but also there is fertilizer production where there is a lot of natural gas consumption, and there is hydrogen production from natural gas. So I think that those are the sectors that are not possible to electrolyze. So then the green hydrogen will have to be implemented. But I will also ask Dora, maybe you have some opinion on what we discussed already and on the hydrogen economy of the future.
Yeah, just very briefly on hydrogen, as Andrzej was saying, it basically can be used for certain industry applications and freight transport, but not a solution for all of our problems. And maybe one comment on the nuclear. It's very interesting. It is an important element of the low carbon electricity production, but even the EU member states don't agree on whether it should be used or should not be used. And the nuclear fleet is very old, and many plants are nearing their lifetimes, but it is considerably cheaper to extend the lifetimes than building new ones, as well as the cost of this extension is competitive or can be competitive with other clean energy options. So nevertheless, they require capital investment, but yeah, I am wary about all the new buildings as well.
We had an opportunity to answer questions from the audience, but I don't see any so far. So there is the last few minutes to ask some questions. I see one comment about nuclear energy. Without nuclear, we will not achieve assumed goals, certainly. But there is some other question. Just let me read it, and I will ask some of the panelists to answer it. Okay, I will read the question loudly. The rapid switch to renewable sources poses risks related to the discontinuity of energy supply. is the EU planning to support some form of conventional energy sources, such as nuclear energy? If not, how to solve the problem of blackouts in the decades to come? Some sources of energy must produce it when it is not blowing or shining. I think we partially already discussed some issues around this, but yes, Andrzej is raising a hand, so please, the floor is yours.
Yes, I was kind of prepared for this question, because this question that the wind is not always blowing, the sun is not always shining is kind of asked quite often, and yes, we know that. The point here is, we're not going to get out of gas or coal by 2030, hopefully by 2030 out of coal. That's something that would be compatible with the Paris Agreement. But the point is here, we can store natural gas, right? So had we used more renewables throughout the summer, we would have had much more natural gas for the winter in our storage. That's the point, right? So yes, for now, we do need those installations that we have already, and we do not need more gas. We just needed to use it in a much more smarter way. So that's the main point. And in case of nuclear as a bridge technology, again, I mean, that's a very long bridge which is far, far away. So I also don't understand why we will not achieve assumed goal without nuclear. I mean, some countries are going to achieve them and already achieved and overachieved their goals without nuclear. So that's I'm afraid that we will not achieve the goals if we assume nuclear will be there one day. So we just have all the tools, maybe not all the tools, but we're getting there. When Kennedy said we will put a man on the moon in 8 years, he just had a one page. We have much, much more than that already now. So not the solutions already there, but we know in which direction we need to look deeper to be climate neutral, to be emissions neutral in 29 years.
And just add one comment on this. It's basically the merit order of these solutions. So what should come first? Yes, nuclear can help with these fluctuations. There will be a need for this service. But what we start with, whether we start with the renovations of the buildings, which seems like a very low-hanging fruit, especially in the Eastern European region, or do we just focus on, for example, CCS, carbon capture and storage? That is, in my opinion, not the solution. That should be the very, very, very last tool that we should be using. So I think, as Andrzej was saying, we should be looking at the range of possibilities and decide on the more suitable ones.
Exactly. If I'm just add to that, exactly, it's a range of solutions. It's not a silver bullet. And we again in Poland we have this in the narrative we have this idea, natural gas will save us, right? That was the previous government, that we will dig for shale gas and we'll find something. So we just hope that something will come. And then obviously in the past was coal, now it's nuclear. No, there will be no silver bullet. Nuclear is kind of like this huge thing that will just take away resources from all the other solutions, something that we cannot afford, and we shouldn't even waste this money on a technology which is many times more expensive than what we already have. Yes, we have to balance the grid with that's relying on renewables. We have to make demand smarter. We have to build in connections and so on and so forth. Something that we have to do with nuclear as well anyway, because nuclear, which will just create a traffic jam in the grid, and because then we will just have to switch off wind turbines and solar panels to just generate more nuclear power, because you wouldn't switch off nuclear power plant. So the issues are there for renewables, but also for nuclear. So I'm not quite sure why we should rely on a source of technology which is expensive, which is too inflexible, that will maybe there in 2030s to solve a problem that we have to solve now, and for which we have much cheaper instruments already now.
Yeah, you were referring to Poland, but the debate is about the general EU market, and I am wondering on your opinion about nuclear in the countries where it already exists. So should there be a plan to shut down all the nuclear power plants, in your opinion, or what is already built and working should be maintained?
Yeah, if I may, I mean, luckily I'm not the one who will be awakened in the middle of the night saying that, you know, a part of your country will be uninhabitable for the next few generations, or for the next 1,000 generations in the case of nuclear catastrophe. It is the probability of this happening is very low, but it's there. So, you know, in Germany, obviously there is a plan to phase out nuclear power plants, and I'm not the one who is making the decision, luckily, and I don't want to be. You know, if you phase out nuclear, I mean, phasing nuclear, but we have to differentiate these two topics. Phasing out nuclear is one thing, building new nuclear is a completely other topic. And on this one, I have a very, very clear answer. We just have a cheaper solution that we can implement on a much shorter timescale.
Yeah, I agree. Using the existing nuclear reactors is something we need to do. Whether we need to build new ones, yeah, it's another question. And should we be trying to use more renewables instead of building new nuclear power plants? My answer is yes.
Okay, just the one more thing that was in that question that I read, how to solve the problem of blackouts in the decades to come. So there is opinion that we would face some blackouts. Do you think that there is a risk of this, and how could we avoid it? Just the last question from my side, I guess. To anyone of you, if you want to answer.
Sure. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks, Dora. You know, first of all, it may sound like a broken record, but well, develop more renewables. And yes, gas will be there with us for the next few years anyway. The point is you use less of it if you have more wind turbines, if you have more solar energy, if you have more biogas power plants, and so on and so forth. So, you know, the more we develop those sources of energy, the better we stand. Just one example in this case, in 2015, we had a brownout already, right? It was very close to a blackout. This issue did not come up anymore, among others, mainly because in these hot days, we could rely on solar energy. Now the problem will move to the winter. When the government promotes electric heating, for example, only electric heating, apart from contributing to energy poverty, because electric heating will be very expensive, electric only heating without a heat pump in between that multiplies the amount of electricity that you use in the end. This will have a huge impact on the grid as well. So we just have to be smart about it. In the winter, usually we have much more wind. The point here is you have to have capability to store it as well, to decrease demand in some sectors as well, and to import or export electricity. So the system will be more complicated. It will not be, you know, you switch off the power plant where there's no demand. It just needs to be much, much smarter. And I think that's a challenge. That's a challenge, but I think we can face it. If that was easy to solve, we would have done it already. But the point is, we just need to use all the resources to get in this direction. How can we have 100% renewable power sector, energy sector as well later on, without relying on sources of energy which don't exist or pollute our planet and our air as well?
And also to add, maybe some demand side reduction policies are needed as well, and more efficiency is needed, and investment in the grid itself to be able to take up all the renewables that we are producing or we are planning to produce.
Definitely, and I'm glad that you said about energy efficiency that we should invest in, definitely. So I don't see any more questions, and I think that we fulfilled the planned time for this discussion. I would like to thank you so much for participating. I hope that it was very interesting for our listeners. It was more of a general discussion on energy topics, but I think it's never enough to discuss some issues, especially that some things are now on the floor due to this energy shocks that we talked about. So thank you so much, and I invite all of the listeners to read our study and to follow Polish Economic Institute on our work that we will be doing in the future and that we've done in the past. So thank you, Dora, and thank you, Andrzej, and thank you all the listeners for participation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.
Thank you for the invitation.